So what was the issue with level of detail again? Well, the goal is to provide a variety of models with degrading complexity, which will be used depending on the distance from the current viewpoint. There is one very important detail coming along with the different shapes. They all must use exactly the same texture. And that is the true challenge when you create your LOD shapes. Let us immediately go to practice and see how we would proceed with our mug. This is our base shape. And we already use that for the high LOD. Now the first goal is to reduce the number of used vertices, while we keep the shape as intact as possible. Let's make a copy of our shape in object mode. Select the mug, then press Shift-DX, to keep the copy aligned on the X-axis. Please get used to always rename your objects in a meaningful sense. This object will become our medium LOD model, so let's name it accordingly. Please remind that Second Life will transform all of our quads to triangles. We can do the triangulation in Blender by going to Edit Mode, then press Ctrl-T. We immediately see that the face density is very high along the upper border of the cup. That is where we added an extra edge loop to sharpen the border. I think we can safely remove this edge loop. But hold on, we can do even more. Look at the walls of the mug. It appears to me that we have used a lot of faces here. Maybe we should reduce them also? But how can we do this without recreating the entire object? Well, Blender has an option to delete edge loops while keeping the mesh intact. Let us try that on the upper border of the cup. Select the edge loop as before by moving the cursor over the edge loop which you want to delete. Then press Alt and right mouse click. But what is this? Now the edge loop is not selected any longer as before? Well, that is caused by our triangulation. Blender simply is no longer able to find the loop. So let us press Ctrl-Z a few times, and return back to the initial version of our cup. And now we can select the edge loop again by using Alt right mouse click, just as we have done in the past, then delete the loop by pressing X, edge loop. Now let us try to remove every second vertical edge. Select one edge, and delete the loop. No, we do not want it like that. The center points of the mug have been deleted along with the edge. Press Ctrl-Z. We want to preserve the center vertices. So we have to deselect them before we remove the edge. Now it worked. Let us proceed with removing each second edge loop. And here is the trick how you can do that a little bit faster. Select the center vertices and hide them by pressing H. Now you can select the vertical edges and delete them right away, but only one at a time. Here I repeatedly select an edge with Alt right click, then delete the edge with X edge loop. And I have to do this 16 times in a row because Blender cannot delete multiple edge loops in one shot. Well, after selecting all vertices, we see the shape has far less faces as before. But take a look at the UV map. It is broken. And when we inspect the model, we see that we also have lost a few of our seam definitions. Let us first fix the seams for this shape. Now I have to unwrap this object exactly like I previously did unwrap the original model. Remind that I have to do this because I must reuse the original texture on all LOD shapes. So here is a nice trick. I switch back to the original model for a moment, and export the UV layout as a visual guide for my unwrapping task. I can get the UV layout from the image editor. Simply go to UV, Export UV Layout, and then select a suitable file name. And simply re-import the layout to the image stack for further usage. Now we are ready with our preparations. Thus we switch to the medium LOD shape. Select all vertices and assign them to the UV layout texture. Now we can use the UV layout to adjust the UV map to the texture. I do the unwrapping exactly like I did it with the initial model. Hence I first unwrap the entire model, then I hide the cup bottoms. I unwrap the remaining part with a cylinder unwrapping. Then I use the UV layout as a guide for placing the horizontal edges on the UV map. And in order to see single edges I enable again the synchronization between the 3D view and the image editor. Remind that you can select isolated parts of the UV map by moving the cursor on top of the part and press L. However, this works only when you have disabled the synchronization. When we are finally satisfied with the adjustments, then we select all vertices in edit mode, and again assign our sunflower textured to the model. But we end up with a nicely reduced version of the cup which behaves well for the medium LOD. Let us proceed to make the low LOD shape in exactly the same way as just shown. Press Shift-D, X, to create the next lower LOD shape. And rename it appropriately. Then hide the center vertices. Reduce the shape face count by removing each second vertical edge. Unhide the hidden vertices again. And recreate the broken seams. Select all vertices, and assign the UV layout to the model in the image editor. Unwrap to get the border circles. Hide the center vertices. Go to front view, and unwrap to cylinder projection. Select all vertices, and in the image editor scale the UV map to fit to the image. Continue to readjust the UV faces according to the UV layout. When we are done with the adjustments, we proceed with the lowest LOD shape. Here we can remove the following 2 additional horizontal edge loops. And then proceed in the same way as before. We end up with 4 versions of the cup with decreasing numbers of vertices and faces. And all versions have been unwrapped in exactly the same way. Now we only have to export our models, one by one, into separate Gaia files, and finally import the entire set of files to Second Life. And we see that our cup behaves much nicer at the LOD transitions compared to the automatic created LODs. So by now we are finished with this chapter, but as before I recommend that you do a bit of practicing before heading to the next chapter where we will proceed with multiple materials on one single object.